Hi, I'm Coach MK, founder of the Fitness Protection Program. I'm a run coach, not a life coach. We're never really talking about the running. Running is the tool. It's the conduit we use to examine the world we live in, as well as its impact on our own lives and the lives of the people around us. How we react to certain people and to certain stories tells us a lot about how we view ourselves. I'm committed to the thoughtful, intentional exploration of the importance of running so that no one discounts their own badassery, ever. Final note, this podcast is geared towards every runner who won't lose their home, livelihood, or health insurance if they show up to the corral with a hangover. Not that I'm encouraging you to do that, just saying. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Fitness Protection Podcast. Oh my God, sorry I'm late, but I got a haircut. And as I was walking out the door, I was like, ugh, my hairdresser's next to the post office. I should probably
Therefore,
go.
all the excuses were gone. Your hair looks amazing, by the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I put it in my Instagram story. I like it. I've discovered those recently. I've had a lot of fun with the stories. I'm like, oh, I can add music and sound and little dancing pictures. Why not? I'm 16. It's fun. Anne Helen Peterson at Celebrity Gossip Academic Style. That's her Facebook page, and she used to have a blog. That was her PhD dissertation. It was all about society, what we choose to focus on, what they can sell in the tabloids actually tells us a lot about societal expectations of women. Her work is fascinating.
I love her work.
She recently has started talking a lot about burnout, not just in millennials, but everywhere. And she also talks a lot about errand fatigue and how that kind of ties into burnout. It's just one more thing you have to do, and how like
Thank God it's real.
It is real. It's the thing. And everyone's list of what's on, that thing I just can't make myself do. It's very, very different. For me, that thing is absolutely going to the post office for any reason. I don't care how fast it is. I don't care. It's a little too far away, meaning I couldn't walk there. And I can walk to a lot of things. My entire life exists within a 2-mile radius of my house. I'm exceedingly fortunate, but I also did it on purpose. And when I have to leave that little bubble, I'm like, there better be a real good reason. Real good reason. Mm-hmm. And another thing that does not exist within that bubble, but happens to be close to the post office, is the library. And I know you can shame me all you want. Like, why won't you go to, I love the public library. I saw the pictures of you and Ross there this morning. Here's the thing. I have 4 kids. Where we can go is incredibly limited. And every time you go to the library, and I know this as a kid who lived in the public library in my small town in Tennessee when I was growing up, I was there every day, whenever I could. I was there after school. I was there on the weekends. I was whenever my mom would beg me to go. So it was never a question of would we return, but how would it be tomorrow or the next day? I never kept a book long enough to have anything be overdue. So with my kids, though, every time we go and they want to bring something home, because you always want to bring something home, somebody will always need to nap, and we don't get to stay as long as we want to. That is a mandate to return. And that is the type of pressure I just don't need in my life.
Oh my God. Actually, I have to tell you this. So this morning when I did take Ross to the library, we rode in our bike trailer, even though it's 100 fucking degrees outside. I'm very proud of myself. We put on our sunscreen. We went, we did it. And the reason I like to take her there is because I only have one child. So both my eyes can be going in the same direction the whole time. And we love to get out Mo Willems books. I know you like Mo Willems too. We're obsessed with Mo Willems. And we have had one of the Elephant and Piggy books out forever. And I have been renewing it because I can't fucking find it. And this morning, finally, I looked one more time before we left. And then I got to the library and I was like, listen, I'm sorry, but it's really stressing me out to have this book on my books out that I know I'm not going to find. I'm not going to return. It's just not going to happen. So please just charge me the fee. Let me pay you the $10 and let's wipe it from my record, please, because it's really stressing me out. And the guy just kind of smiled at me. He was like, all right, I'll take care of that for you. And I felt so much better because it was like this obligation had been lifted from me. And the rest of the visit was very nice. We actually found a book by Nathan Lane called something about a dog whose name, I can't believe I'm not going to remember the dog's name. Pretty sure it's named Mabel, Naughty Mabel or something like that. And Roz made me read it about 5 times in a row. And it's very much in Nathan Lane's tone of voice, and it made her really happy. Anything I can get that's going to make her happy, even if it means I have to read it 5 times, I'm generally going to sign up for that. So
yeah. Well, this isn't even like you only have one kid thing. I do postulate it's a lot easier to have 4 than 3 or 2, or even definitely easier than 1, because there are times they will entertain each other and not talk to me. You probably don't get that luxury. Either daddy's home to take her attention or he isn't.
Yeah, and right now he isn't.
Oh my God. Oh my God. But yeah, so everyone has their sort of that list of things that it's not that I hate public libraries. We go to the book lovers ball every year. Which is a big fundraiser for, well, if you've ever seen me in pictures on the Facebook page, if I'm dressed in a ball gown, the event, like the big event, we have different fundraisers where I'll wear evening gowns, but the ball gowns, like the one that's hanging behind me right now, that's for the book lovers ball. It's my prom. I love it. And they shut the library down and drape it in, it's like having your high school prom in the high school library. It's very much the feel they cultivate it. And it's such a great party. And it is such a good time. I really, really look forward to it. Outside of that, I can commit to once a year, but having to come back within a week with all 4 kids and all 4 kids being like, that's a lot of stars that have to align because they don't have a drive-through. The library when I was growing up, even in like Podunk, Tennessee, we had a drive-through like slot at the library, and we just don't have that return box here. I'm like, so I have to come when it's open? Or they do have a return box at some of them, but you have to turn it to the right. So that's just the ask gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So whenever, and it's easy to be like, well, shame the person instead of looking at the why. It's a lot easier to shame the person. Well, you should support your public library. I do financially more than most folks probably do. If you really want to talk
paid my public library $10 for that Mo Willems book today. Who says I don't support the library?
Just saying, how much the newest Mo Willems book cost for me? I mean, if you want to make it a financial prudence thing, I buy them, but so it's there, you could argue on any merit that you wanted to. I'd be like, well, I bought it and it was cheaper and I donate to the library. If you were going to come at me and be like, well, you should support. Support can mean different things. It's another one of those words. Do we both agree on its meaning when we enter a conversation? And I think that's always going to be pretty important, especially if a conversation is going to start to devolve really, really quickly. Because everyone has their list of like things I just can't handle. And so instead of judging each other for things on that list, talk about the why, and then you've got a really interesting conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Plus, I'm really proud of myself that I got that box to the post office today. Yay! But that is also my explanation as to why I'm 10 minutes late to being here.
Well, no big deal. Whatever. I just can't stand when people are late, but I guess I should probably ask why. And then I would get the real answer.
Well, no, not always. Sometimes you will. Today you will, and you did, obviously. But I mean, how many introverts made plans, were excited about those plans, and then when the day came, they were like, oh, and then came up with a really good lie to get out of it. I think like not all excuses for lateness or not showing up are lies, but a lot of them are. And I don't know, it just doesn't bother me. Like I know the people who are not likely to show up, and I'm like, okay, I get it. If I want to see the person, I come up with a framework where they would show up, or a time and place where they would, you know what I mean? Or if I really like the person, maybe there's some other way other than showing up in the same place at the same time, which again, in this day and age can be a lot to ask of a person. Sometimes when you can just FaceTime at home from TV sitting on each other's couches with your own bathroom and your own glass of wine, I would argue that could be just as good as sitting on the same couch in certain circumstances. It will never be exactly the same, but good enough is really fantastic. And finding that line, I think, is important in a long-term relationship.
Totally. I find that especially with, I hesitate to talk about my generation because I find a lot of the generalizations about my generation, and I am talking about millennials because I am a millennial. I really hate most of the general statements that people make about millennials, but many of my closest friends are from college, and we are characteristically flung all over the country. We've all moved to different places, either because of jobs or because of partners' jobs or because of education or whatever. And good enough really does have to be good enough. And the friendships that I've really kept close to me are friendships in which we are all really understanding about that with each other. No one shames anyone. It's like, well, you don't have kids, so you should be able to drop everything and make, like, that is not a thing with my group of friends, which I really appreciate. And now a lot of us do have kids, and a lot of us are dealing with shifting pressures in our lives. But no matter what everyone has chosen to do, there is a lot of understanding that, like, we're all kind of getting by day to day and we care about each other. And anytime that we can make to catch up, even if it's just on FaceTime with a glass of wine. I think you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. One of my friends from the West Coast was in town really briefly and down on the Cape with her family. And we were sort of both wishing that either one of us had the energy to make a Boston to Cape meetup thing happen between me and her. And it's like, yeah, I don't get to see you very often, and I love you, and it would be amazing to see you in person, but you have a 2-year-old, I have a 3-year-old. This would be so much effort, and we are both tired, and being tired is real, and we don't need to prove to each other our love and commitment to this friendship by exhausting ourselves for the sake of like a medium quality couple of hours together, you know?
Yeah. Totally. Totally. I say this frequently. I don't say it frequently on the podcast. Podcast is new, but I say it frequently to my local runners. Everything people say about millennials, everything bad, is absolutely a learned behavior. And if you don't know where they learned it, come look at my inbox from 2014 through 2016 when my primary means of employment was Lifetime Fitness. The things people would say, what they felt free to demand, what they felt free to ask for, was kind of like, whoa. Yet when they turn around and like complain about it in the younger generation, I'm kind of like, I'm like, how do you not see how you fostered this? If you do acknowledge your role in it and hate that, that's one thing. But you don't get to hate the results without doing a little bit of like introspection. I am not a millennial, but I fall just outside that boundary. I forget what they call it, zennial. I'm right. I was born in 1978. So I think there's this at the month before I was born all the way through something like 1981. There's this window of time where we're not a really good fit into either Gen X or millennials. And I'm always a little bit kind of confused, which is not, I hate that nonsense where people are like, well, I can see both sides, which means you see neither and you don't want to talk about it. I get it.
It means, hey, take this online quiz and see whether you're more Gen X or more millennial.
Totally.
And those online quizzes do exist.
Yeah. And did you need one to know that you were one?
No, there's no questioning my millennial status. I was born in 1986. So I think I am.
Oh my God.
I can take the online quiz, which is like, are you an older millennial or just a millennial? And I don't really need the online quiz to know that I am an older millennial and I'm, crotchety about some of the millennial things, but not because they belong to millennials as a category, but because like I'm a person and there are behaviors that make me roll my eyes and there are behaviors where I'm like, well, yeah, I should probably think about the why before I roll my eyes too hard. Also because like, I don't need that strain in my life either. Being scornful and judgmental of people all the time because they don't like to go to the post office and what the hell is that? Like that's kind of hard work. Why do I need to be doing that,
Plus, it doesn't really get anywhere. Like, there's a lot of intergenerational understanding. You meet other millennials and y'all kind of are speaking the same language. I meet other people in my whatever named little bracket it is, and we all kind of have the same concerns. But that understanding in between generations, it tends to skip multiple ones. So, like, I look at my daughter and I get worried, like, what is she going to face? At the same time, and we know the world is changing. Everyone acknowledges that the world is changing. Yet when you get there, you resent the changes. Either you acknowledge them or you resent, the children or just the people in the next generation. And it's easier to talk to them than it is to try to change a culture. Part of me gets it. Part of me will never like it. But another thing that needs to be kind of on the same page if we're going to complain about it is something very basic and very simple is the word cheating and how that has changed over time and what that word used to mean versus what it means today and the context in which we throw it around. So the response to our podcast for 3 Days at the Fair, I thought was incredibly strong. I was thrilled. Yay! I will never not be excited to see what worked in my inbox, and I will never not take constructive criticism, even angry criticism, really seriously. The angry criticism is hard. People say mean things. I have feelings. It's not all going to roll off my back. But luckily, so far, we haven't gotten a lot of that. So I'm just thrilled. Because I put a lot of time into putting all of these things together and trying to be really clear in what it is that I'm trying to communicate. I was really nervous to bring up the websites in question. That's just finger quotes how I'm going to refer to them. The websites that have devoted the bulk of their time to calling out cheaters in races. Having lived in Russia for a while and seeing what happens when you don't have democracy, as they definitely did not when it was still forming back in 1994, I know the importance of a free press. As an American, I love it. Now we're kind of in a place where you have to think about what you're doing and the purpose you serve. And you can't do that if you're not thinking about this word cheating and the importance of it and really what it means. So if you were going to define the word cheat, what does that mean to you, Sarah?
It means like ill-gotten gains, right? It means getting something without doing the work that's required to do it honesty. The connotation is dishonesty, I think.
Ill-gotten gains? Oh my God. You went to Harvard. You're so smart. I don't know that I would ever put that comment. It sounds like ill-gotten gains to me. Oh my goodness.
I far from invented that phrase, and of course I cannot think of where exactly it came from. But I guess I was letting my Harvard show a little bit. Sorry.
No, you can always let your Harvard show, your tits, and your ambition here in the fitness protection program. God knows I don't care. It's just when it happens, I will never not be surprised. So Webster's defines cheating as to an act of dishonesty, or to act dishonestly or unfairly in order to gain an advantage, especially in a game or an examination. It's also to avoid something undesirable by luck or by skill. Ooh. So the two base definitions. And I think both are pretty important because, well, let me back up. Where are we going with this? We're 15 minutes into the podcast. This podcast is new. We're still playing around with the format. We're taking a high level look at pop culture, aka current history in the making, and then seeing how our responses to these stories tell us more about how we view and judge ourselves, and how that frequently warped lens focuses in on our goals, our bodies, our expectations. And for most runners, all of that is visible in our approach to running. Granted, that's almost as highbrow as ill-gotten gains, Harvard. But as a coach who guides your expectations and decision-making, I can't do my job well unless we have that conversation. For example, season 4 of Queer Eye dropped yesterday. I was all over it. Have you seen it yet? I know you said it wasn't your thing.
It's not really my thing. We watched an episode, my husband and I, and we're like, this is really sweet and lovely, and we probably won't watch anymore because we're more like the narrative drama types. And also right now we're in a really big Conan O'Brien sketch phase where that's really all we want to watch. And outside of my TV time with him, I don't really watch TV. Since he's been away for the last few days, I have been mainlining the last season of Veep. But Veep is not nearly as kind, let us say, as Queer Eye. And there's a lot of cheating that happens there. And the show does not really smile upon it, but it makes it hella funny.
I bet. If you like Conan O'Brien, by the way, you should subscribe to his podcast. Conan O'Brien Conan Needs Friends. It's amazing. Let's start with the episode with Lisa Kudrow of Friends. They knew each other back before they were famous and are actual best friends in real life. Normally, I don't like podcasts where two friends talk to each other because you're not always in on the joke, or you don't, you can't imagine being there. But these two are so far removed from those days that when they talk about them, anyway, it was super, super duper cool. I missed the Friends wave because I was in the high school marching band, and Friends was on Friday nights, and we performed on Friday nights. And then I went to college and didn't have a TV. And then I moved abroad and didn't have a TV. So I miss Friends completely. And I don't have the same, like, I love-hate relationship or strong feelings about any of the cast members. But I just know that Lisa Kudrow had this series called Net Therapy that I really liked. And beyond that and Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion.
She is amazing. She is amazing. The comeback on HBO is one of the most brilliant things I have ever seen. Both the first season and then the reboot that HBO did 10 years later, or however much later. I think it was 10 years later. She is one of the most talented actresses either. One of the best recent episodes of Mark Maron's podcast was his interview with her. I could listen to her talk all day. I think she's so brilliant.
Well, I would definitely start with the Conan O'Brien podcast, but that I'm getting us off topic, and I hear that's something I need to stop doing. So I hear that feedback loud and clear. Back on topic.
Stop rambling.
Do it gently, Sarah. Do it gently, Sarah. That's what she likes about you.
Stop rambling.
Okay, I'm going to try. All right, back to Queer Eye. Queer Eye is great. So I happened to be on my couch yesterday morning when Queer Eye came on Netflix. I was turning on Netflix for my kids, and there were 5-minute cheerleading uniforms dancing around on the TV. And I'm like, wait, we got to see this. And we all sat down together, and we watched the entire first episode of season 4, and I cried my eyes out. I cried the whole way through it. Jonathan Von Ness, who's the one with the amazing mustache, he went home to Quincy, Illinois to make over his high school music teacher. And a comment that she made really stuck with me. I guess it's a generational thing. We just work. And then we work some more. To not do work that needs to be done is really selfish. To ask for self-care is selfish, and selfish is the worst thing you can be. And she was saying this as an apology and an explanation. Like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to take care of myself, but you gotta understand, this is how my generation was programmed to think. Anything that feels like self-care does not feel natural. And watching that entire exchange was really interesting, in a show that bends over backwards to make sure that no one feels shamed whatsoever. I mean, and that's kind of why I like it. It's not the first thing I would necessarily choose to watch on any given bit of free time. But when I need a warm hug, John Van Ness is there being like, you're so gorgeous, you're so beautiful. And if you just look at this, look at those cheekbones, look at that. I mean, anything he points out, it feels real. He believes that what he's saying, and I believe what he's saying. And that is something we need more of. Someone saying with conviction, this is gorgeous. And I just look at this, look at for another minute. I swear to you, there's beauty right here. Just keep looking at yourself in this mirror. And it's really amazing to watch. And there are times I really need that. But when it comes to his music teacher, there's a lot of guilt to overcome before asking for help, much less resting, relaxing, recharging. What the show, quite brilliantly in my opinion, highlights is how greedy her job as a teacher has become. Usually when Anne Helen Peterson or economists talk about the greedy industries, what they're talking about, law, they're talking about finance. Mm-hmm. They're talking about the jobs we want our kids to go to Harvard in order to get, the ones that pay really well. But you also have to work a whole lot. And more jobs in the current day and age are becoming greedy for a variety of different reasons. Once upon a time, this woman truly loved music and saw music as a mechanism to connect with kids, to show them what they were capable of, to foster discipline, self-confidence, teamwork, you name it. She had evenings and weekends to herself. She has a husband. She had hobbies. Now her state is in a budget crisis that is falling squarely on public schools, which are funded by local income taxes, and which in turn are recovering from the housing crisis over a decade ago and ongoing dynamics that are really hitting small towns like Quincy really, really hard. So if I was going to quote Liar's Poker, the seminal tome on Wall Street that I read when I was in college, to prepare myself before I got there, first you carefully trim the fat by firing the people you didn't like anyway. Then you cut more fat by firing the people who weren't performing. When the third round of layoffs come, this is when things get tough. From this point forward, you're cutting into meat. You're cutting good people who are doing good work and increasing the workload for everyone else who now has to do 3 times the work at the same level or be viewed as a poor performer. Arts are always on the top of the list of things to cut, not just because they're deeply undervalued and we gotta compete with China type of world. So now this woman has to get her students to help her fundraise year round. Acknowledging how unfair this is would, not just in her mind, but in the minds of many, make her a whiner or a poor performer and just lazy and call her job as well as her life's work at that school into jeopardy. Telling her to take time for self-care isn't going to sell her on jogging or yoga or travel or even more basic levels of care like seeing the doctor when she needs to. We make it about her. We make it about how many band members go on to major in music. The metrics by which she and her programs are judged are completely unfair and out of her control. She didn't become a teacher to encourage kids to go into concert band and then onto the orchestra. She did it to use music in a different way, which is really what the arts are for. Again, kind of like Queer Guy, he comes in and says, here's this thing that I bet you never thought you could do, and a person sees himself a little bit differently as a result or sees new possibilities. We do that through running. She does it with music. I will never judge my ability to do my job well by how many of my runners qualify for the trials or Boston or reach whatever goal they think they're paying me to set. I just think that's the wrong way to look at things, and I refuse to change it. And I know that's frustrating when we're trying to do marketing for a business, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to talk about improvements. I'm not going to glorify one thing that I don't expect from everyone all the time. I will not link my understanding of competency in my position to you in any way. And I know that sounds odd and different, but this is the sort of thing that happened to me on Wall Street and I resented for years. But we need to focus less on how quantifiable the experience is and look at the unquantifiable things, like how important the band experience was to kids like baby John Van Ness way back when, and how important maybe this running experience or this program has been to the people, the participants in it, how reframing this perspective has actually brought around those results that everyone thought was beyond them. Focus on the work and the score will take care of itself. On a total side note, lack of talent can totally be canceled out by hard work in the marching band. I know this because I played French horn for 3 years, and then I was the drum major in mine. Yay! Concert performances are a different story. Talent matters, and it's like a death march to be like the most committed, who practices most, who sleeps with their instrument. Marching band, and I hear cross-country running. My school didn't have it, but the way I hear others talk about it, those are the 2 big repositories for the non-talented, non-athletic kids that don't really fit in anywhere else in the school. It's the group anyone can join if they didn't make it on any other team or didn't have anything else that sounded interesting that they thought they could do. So somehow it's viewed as lesser rather than respected for what it is and the purpose that it actually serves.
Yeah. Wow. Like everything that you've just been saying about the music teacher and the metrics for how you judge success. I mean, you're talking about exactly, the field that I was in for so many years. And the reason why I always felt like I was fighting and clawing for legitimacy is that like language programs in colleges, I've been looking at data for this at my job. My boss is preparing a talk about this. Language programs are declining in enrollment all over the country. People are not majoring in Italian, surprise, surprise, as much as they majored in Italian, even when I went to college, which was not super
They're being told it's not the international language of business and commerce, and there's no point in learning Italian, and Italians speak English, and they're not dumb. They're hearing this economic argument that, in my opinion, misses the whole reason why you would want to study it.
Right. And I mean, what made me feel really successful as a teacher was when I connected with the students in my class and when they really saw something different and found their way to kind of a different version of the path that they were always on because of something that they read in my class, because of something that they studied, because of like something that was sparked in them by a syllabus that I created and that they then went on to take ownership of and make into something. And many of the students that I'm talking about did not major in Italian. And that's all, the administration cares about. That's all the data that you see. And that's why there are so honestly, that's the main reason why there are so few jobs in my field, why it was so hard and frankly never going to happen, for me to try and get hired. And even if I had gotten hired, the jobs that I was just like dying to get and that I was trying so hard to get and really, working as hard as I possibly could to get, those were going to be greedy jobs too. And they were not going to pay me law money or finance money. The job that I was one of 2 finalists to get 2 years ago was at a small liberal arts college in the Northeast, but not Northeast, like super close to where I am now. Like it would have been a major move for my whole family. My husband would have had to quit his job and get probably a much less well-paying job in the city where we would have had to move. And we would have been expected to live on campus and I would have been expected to be available to students all the time. It was a residential college. And really, that's what I wanted. I wanted to like be in this job where I got to be super, high touch with all of my students and have like, study parties at my house with cookies and espresso. And that was the college experience that I had. And the work that it takes to create that kind of environment, it's endless. And the professors that I had in college really loved it. And they loved living in the town where I went to college. They loved, kind of bringing up their families in that milieu. But a lot of colleges like that have a hard time getting and keeping faculty because either you really like it or you really don't. And they are not paying you enough to keep doing it if you don't like it,
What the hell college did you go to? I'm sorry.
I went to Middlebury College.
I'm like, cookies and espresso for stuff. I'm like, what? This sounds like Harry Potter type of shit. Wow.
Well, so there was an Italian residential house.
That was not what I experienced in the former faculty of languages and linguistics. Georgetown used to have a whole school devoted strictly to languages. Yeah. I was Ling Lang. Ling Lang, and Ling Lang no longer exists, probably for all the same reasons that you just listed. But no, that was not what you just said was not my experience.
No, I mean, I went to a tiny liberal arts college in the mountains. I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, which is an amazing school, and it's gotten much harder to get into since I went there. Oh my God. I was so lucky to be able to go there. It was my first choice. I applied early decision. I was like Middlebury or bust. That's all I wanted. In part because it was really well known for language education. And the reason it's really well known for language education is because it has faculty members, not graduate students, but full professors who teach every level of Italian. So I had like Italian 101 with professors who, had tons of experience, had been doing this forever and were really invested. They made that department just a really warm place and really happy place. And yes, there was weekly coffee hour at the Italian residential house with espresso and homemade cookies from the Italian TA who they hired a new one every year from Italy, like a college student. MK, make me stop rambling.
No, because my TA was more like a dominatrix. I was terrified of her. She had this thick Russian accent because she was Romanian and resented the Russian language and hated having to be a TA to us, but evidently it paid quite well. And she just was like, I don't understand why you're all falling asleep at 6 a.m. and aren't excited to be here. And would just like kind of snap at us, which was super effective. I learned a lot because every day I walked in so scared I thought I was going to fail until I realized the lab portions were for like you literally can't fail them. No one told me that, but I was convinced everything went into my grade. I had no idea how little contact actually existed between the laboratory, the adjunct professors, and the full-time tenured professors who were actually grading my papers. Oh well.
Yeah. I was one of those grad students at Harvard who taught Italian language for years and years and years. And I loved doing it. I loved all of the work that went into it, even though it really killed me sometimes and took a lot of time away from like my dissertation and my research and all my other stuff. That was what I loved doing. I loved that contact and I loved the feeling of like, oh, maybe we just did something that you're going to take with you into life somewhere, even if you don't major in Italian. But of course, if you don't major in Italian, like no one is going to look at me twice. I only ever never got the recognition, if you can even call it that, for, having students that decided, yeah, I'm going to major in Italian and take courses in, centuries old literature by white men, instead of, I don't know, something that I could see really carrying me into a career in a more direct fashion. The fact that we expect students to make that choice and we kind of make the funding for language programs contingent upon them making that choice is like kind of messed up. But anyway, now I'm the one who's off on a tangent. You better get me back on topic, MK.
I don't know that I even want to do it now. I just want to have a whole big conversation about like how angry I get when people like make fun of the arts. Like, what are you going to do with an English degree? I'm like, all kinds of stuff. That it's not what it's for. This is what we're getting rid of.
I totally agree.
It teaches you how to think about the world. And if ever I've annoyed you by having this big long conversation, okay, what does any of this have to do with running? I'm like, this is exactly what it has to do with running, and exactly what it has to do with coaching, and exactly what it has to do with anything. I know how to think. I know how to approach something I didn't know. Very few people come to the university level speaking the language they choose to major in. I mean, especially the more esoteric. And I say esoteric not to be, I just don't have a better exotic, I know is a loaded word, but Spanish, maybe like you want to, Spanish, French, all of that's generally broadly taught in high schools. Russian, not so much. Chinese, not so much. Korean, not so much. So if you come and decide to major in these languages, there's not a high expectation that you would have a deep understanding already before walking through the door. You can come and pick up these majors from scratch. You don't even have to be good. There's no bar to entry. So they have to teach you how to approach second language acquisition, how to not judge the culture through your own framework. All of this nuance, everything that I learned went so far beyond a skill that you could argue Russian isn't really necessary. I'm like, economic trends come and go. In 1998, people were like, oh my God, you're going to make so much money. You're going to make so much money. Oh my God. Because, the tiger economy was happening. And then in 1999, the ruble devaluation happened. And boy, not only was that major looking pretty stupid, so was my White House internship in 1999 and the economy I was going to graduate into. I'm like, really, you want to work on Wall Street now? Like all of a sudden, everything's great until it isn't. But what I did have was a whole lot of pluck and no better options, and the ability to sort through my options and really think about what I was doing and why. And there's value in that. And I'm not saying like everyone's looking at college wrong. I think that if you look at the pressures that kids are under and the decision-making frameworks that they make now, maybe it is harder now. And when I went to school, you could major in English or Russian and still get the same job as the kid who majored in finance, because really 4 years of undergraduate finance, like you know how to use Excel, and that's a leg up, but you don't know how to think. And we're seeing that now. I mean, we're seeing what that did not pay dividends. The people who majored in English and have the framework to think about data and learned in the confines of an investment bank how to manipulate that data, those are the people that really succeed because they know what they're doing and why. They're not just a spreadsheet monkey.
Oh, yeah. And like, don't get me wrong. I don't subscribe to the notion that majoring in Italian is worthless. Quite the opposite. But I know that the advising that my students are getting is telling them that majoring in Italian is a waste of their time.
Yeah.
My view was always, okay, I've already lost that battle. But what I can do is encourage students to enroll in courses where Italian is a conduit to thinking, just like you're saying, to thinking about things and approaching the world differently. And one of the things I was most proud of was creating a course about migration in Italian culture, not in US culture, but at a time where ideas about migration, immigration, all these sorts of things in the US, this was in 2017, are, kind of at a boiling point. And it was like, well, so what can we do with this language that we're studying? What are some ways that we can gain perspectives that might teach us how to think about these things that we're facing in our own country? And that was the course that got the highest enrollment of any course I ever taught in Italian. And I feel like the reason for that was that I was trying to sell it. I mean, to say it in a really crass way, that is what you're doing with Harvard students. They call the week where Harvard students choose their courses, they call it shopping week. So you are literally selling your course to them in that period because they don't have to commit to anything until they have shopped.
Well, and why would they when they don't have any like practical majors? You guys don't have a school of engineering. Exactly. Finance is not offered as an undergraduate major. On the surface, if you look at Harvard,
is very definite about that.
And I think that's great. Like that to me is a big selling point. Like you are teaching kids how to think and how to do things. There's something to be said for that. But while the rest of the world is looking for a leg up or an advantage of some sort in a very limited capacity, not just to compete with Harvard, but going to become a race to pay off all the student loans and all that debt.
Exactly. That is the thing. And that's what a lot of students are thinking about. And I think that they're anxious when they're making these choices because they're thinking about like, how can I position myself well to pay off that debt? And I get that. That's real. And what I wanted my message to be was that Italian is not just this thing you're going to learn and then put in your pocket and maybe use or maybe not use, but only as relates to Italy. It is this thing that you are going to use to approach real issues that are absolutely a part of your world. And they're going to be a part of what you do later in life as a person and as a citizen, no matter what you major in, no matter what job you get.
In a time, though, maybe the pressure is real. And not to invalidate anything you just said, but if you're talking to, say, a sophomore or a junior, their response might be, well, I know I probably want to work in finance, but I'm not majoring in finance. All my friends that went last year, there's 300 people in the room. Everyone wants to major in finance. And the only people who got interviews were the finance majors. So the world has changed. The only way I'm going to get that job is if I major in finance. And that is something I don't really want to be locked into. Trying to sell a young person on it, on the merits, could be ignoring the decision-making parameters that they're using. Like, yeah, that's really great, but now I got to get a hiring manager to understand that. No one's hiring English majors anymore because it's not cool, or because, hiring managers have been told, bring me anything but an English major. So where the demand is and the demand that you're catering to, it can turn into from like, I will make a passionate case for majoring in a language you don't understand, but I can't shame anyone for not doing it. They have no idea how they're going to pay off all the student loans. But now we are completely like off topic.
I actually don't think we are. I think we're really getting to like kind of the core of what we're talking about here.
Yay!
Like the pressure, the why people make decisions, why people cheat.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really kind of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you. By the way, this is kind of the new format we wanted to talk about, guys. Nothing is set in stone, though. If you absolutely hate this, how far we are into the podcast, and we haven't talked about specifically running yet, tell us that and tell us why. If there's specific topics you want us to cover, tell us what those topics are. Email info@coachesandlove.com. We're not going to be doing surveys for a while. Right now, we're still figuring out what it is we want to talk about and how we want to approach and frame these messages. Now, because last week, we only really figured out the audio equipment. So we're slow. We're getting there. And thank you for being on this ride with us. It's totally worth it. But I do feel like this conversation gives us a really good backdrop, like you said, to talk about cheating, because most of us were first introduced to this notion in the academic sense. Cheating was about not doing the work most of the time, about copying someone else's homework, about copying someone else's answers on the test. But school has changed. Academics have changed. Pressures have changed. It's no wonder kids are stressed out when one bad day can put your dreams like permanently out of reach. Like that article in my Nuzzle newsletter about the Princeton math whiz who at 34 started a career in math, right? Because he took one test when he was little and was told that he was bad at math, so he stayed away from it for years after that. But there are too many qualified applicants, too much competition, and no room for error anywhere, because that error, instead of a learning tool for you about being better, now becomes the stick that you're beaten with, and the only thing you've learned is that I'm not allowed to make mistakes in certain capacities. So I'm sure a whole lot of cheating happens, and though I'm never going to advocate for it specifically, I'm not going to bash on cheaters without looking at the forces that would have prompted them to do that. If there's a whole lot of cheating going on in your organization, that is your organization, you're responsible for it, fix it. Do something as a manager that if you have the capacity to change it, not specifically at a teacher, but something, this is bigger than a teacher, more at a system. Look at what they're being asked to do. When I started Wharton, they told us very clearly, you are going to be assigned about 350 pages of reading every week that you will be expected to understand. It's sort of like taking a drink from a fire hose and expecting to not get your shirt wet. You've got to figure out how to prioritize what you really need to absorb, and it's going to be different for everyone since you all come from different backgrounds, and how to best allocate your time and to work with teams. That's intentional. You will never be expected to know how to be the best at every function in an organization. You just need to know when your accountant is cheating the company, when the financials that you have to sign off on as a CEO don't make sense. You need to be able to screen really effectively for outliers and know when someone is actually doing something really well versus someone else coming along and trying to play Game of Thrones and take the throne for themselves. So all of this is the sort of nuance that I have no idea if my classmates are actually going to practice, or even if I'm doing it well now. But you can talk about relaxing and self-care to somebody at Wharton or someone in a high school right now, and they're not going to hear you any more than the teacher and Jonathan Von Ness's music teacher would. Like where she is now, having to fundraise 24/7 and work all the time. Like if I stop, then everything stops. Like I don't get to do this. You don't understand my why. It's not that I want to be a robot. It's I can't relax. I will feel too guilty. I can't take a day off. If I do, I will be behind. I will lose any edge that I have.
Yeah.
I went to college on a golf scholarship and didn't play golf. I've talked in the Mantra Pod last week about how I blacked out. Like I'm a 17-year-old kid blacking out on a golf course at the state tournament. And you can make that about how weak or wimpy I am, or how I just couldn't handle the pressure, and how like pressure is really great, and make it about me. Or you can make it at like the kid who thinks her only ticket out to better is this game on this day. And are you doing anything different if you're telling your kids this could be scholarship money for you, trying to motivate them? That motivation, there's a line when it turns into pressure, that's different for every person. But this is why I believe so strongly that sports do not categorically lead to teamwork or better, and that more pressure, you can hit a mule a couple times, it's going to run faster. Hit him too much, it's going to die.
So what I see is my defining sports story from when I was a kid. And I know I've told a couple of them. I've talked about being on the soccer team and getting most conscientious player and all of that stuff. But this was before that. This was when I was in 6th grade. And I had been on this like fun kids swim team when I was 8 and 9 years old, where like it was 25 meters and every ribbon is a personal best and like cool and whatever. And then my family moved to Arizona, and that was in part because of my mom's health. This was when my mom had breast cancer. And the only swimming option, there was no like fun, cool Belmont Dolphins kids swim team. There was like the Arizona Marlins, the state team. My parents were like, well, you're going to keep being on the swim team. And I was like, yeah, because swim team was like this fun thing. The Arizona Marlins state swim team warmed up with like 500 meters. That's 20 lengths of the pool.
Whoa.
20 lengths of the pool, I maybe swam over the course of like 3 practices on the Belmont Dolphins. And this was the warm up. And I was just like, oh my God. I lasted a few practices. I went to one meet where my event was the 100 butterfly. Oh. I don't know if you've ever done the butterfly, but it is absolute hell. It is so hard. I was the last kid in the pool by so much. And my dad liked to be the timer at the swim meets because it gave him something to do. So he was like timing me in my lane, just like watching me trail behind everyone and finish several minutes after everybody else and get out of the pool. The pool is empty. It was the most humiliating thing ever. But there was this whole like, not quitting thing. And I don't know if I asked to quit. I actually don't remember whether I asked if it was okay for me to quit or whether I just knew instinctually that it was not okay for me to quit, at least until the season was over. But I hated practice. I hated the meets. Everything about it was pressure and it made me feel terrible. So I just stopped going. Instead of going to practice, I would go to the library and screw around on the internet looking up like phone pranks. That's seriously what I printed out, lists of like funny lines you could call. You remember back in the day when everyone had home phones and you would call them up and be like, is your, refrigerator running or whatever? That was my discovery of the internet, was that there were websites devoted to telephone pranks, and I would just like laugh my ass off at them for a couple of hours, and then I would get my swimsuit wet in the library sink and I would scuttle over to the pool and just like walk out. Oh, hey mom, what's up? Yeah, practice was good. Let's go home. I would go home and I would like hang my swimsuit up on the drying rack. Yep, I totally went to swim practice. And that went on for a couple of months. I just faked going to swim practice, and my parents caught me one day because my mom like got there a little early with my little brother, was like, let me see if I can catch Sarah at swim practice because I'm so proud of her because she's been working so hard. And she went in and the swim coach was like, oh yeah, I guess I just thought Sarah quit the team because I sure haven't seen her in weeks. And then I showed up with my wet swimsuit. It's like, oh, hi mom. That's probably the most trouble I have ever been in. And my parents actually probably, this was in retrospect, at the time I was very resentful, but in retrospect, it was probably the right move. They sent me to therapy because they were like, holy shit, what is making you do this? Something must be really going on that we are not seeing. And they probably assumed that there was a lot going on with my mom being sick and having just moved to a new school and all this stuff. But they were like, this actually seems like a sign that you need help.
Did they do any introspection themselves? Or did they just force you to introspect why you lied?
That's a good question. And maybe I should ask my dad because I
think
know.
That's the most important question. That's where I would start as a parent. I put my child in a situation where they feel like they need to lie.
That's where I would start as a parent.
This is what I think companies need to do.
Agree.
Or a classroom setting, cheating is going on. Why? It's usually not, we can make it about like one bad student. But what the truth of the matter is, it's probably something much bigger and easier and more simple than that. And the lesson you want them to learn, you're the one that needs to learn one yourself.
Yeah, and knowing my parents, I'm sure that there was some introspection on their parts. I don't know how much of it was like active and out loud. Knowing my mom, because I know that she often worried about being a bad mom. These are the things that I wish I could ask her about now. I wish we could have these conversations. I feel like I'm sure she thought about this stuff all the time. So I will never know about that. Now that you say that, I probably should ask my dad. I would like to know. I would like to know more from an adult perspective about what he was thinking. He brought it up with me several years later as like, this was a time that you showed me I couldn't trust you. And I was like, Dad, I was so wounded by that. I was like, I couldn't speak to him for like days after that. I was so upset that he would like bring it up again.
Dad, this shows me that you don't really listen or care. I mean, quite frankly, you can demonize me in this story, but you're still the parent. You created the framework and the incentives to lie. So let's talk about that. See, this is why I get in trouble. I force that conversation. I'm like, I'm sorry, you're going to beat me with that stick? Then what do I have to lose? Watch this. Gonna go MK on it. But clearly I've had these same conversations with my dad. That's why we don't speak.
That's probably why I haven't had the conversation with my dad. I don't think he would stop speaking to me over it because that's not really his style, but I'm not sure I'm going to like what he says, you know? And that scares me a little bit.
I'm not telling you what you have to do. You for me, I hit a point where I just started saying everything, because y'all don't know the MK before, the people pleasing, everything's my fault, I'm going to make everything okay person that I definitely used to be, where I truly carried the weight of everything and so much pressure on my shoulders. And Atlas just shrugged one day. I did read that book and it probably made me a butthead for a long time, but it was the first thing I read where I felt seen and understood. And I remember how that book made me feel. Reading it now as a grown-up, you can kind of roll your eyes at it. For a kid who's carrying too much pressure and feels like no one else has to do all the work that I do, no one else is pushed the way that I'm pushed, this isn't fair. That book is really going to speak to you in a way that you can either, again, demonize me for it, or say like, wow, what is it about this book? And that's the critical thinking that you learn as a Russian major, I would argue as an Italian major, as a liberal arts major, and as someone in the marching band who isn't there because they have this huge amount of musical talent, but that's not what the marching band is for. That higher level thinking is important to hone in on a moment, because otherwise all you're doing is shaming a person instead of actually solving the problem, getting to the root of the matter, and getting to a better place together. It was never about you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've lied. I've cheated. I'm not going to beat myself up too hard for it. But like, if you think that you can't handle anyone who has ever told a lie, I've lied. Now what? You sure you haven't? There are a lot of times in these moments where people don't think they're lying to me, to each other, to themselves. They think, it's who are you lying to and what are you trying to get? I'm now someone who's trying to deceive or manipulate to get something from you. That is a totally different story. Like the guy on the bar who says he works at Goldman Sachs and is trying to get you into bed for whatever nefarious reason, that he's making assumptions. Like, that's just everything about that. That's terrible, right? They're misrepresenting themselves. And if you are in a situation where you have to misrepresent yourself in order to get ahead, what are you doing there? What do you really think you're going to get? The jig is going to be up at some point. Right. For everyone else where the cheating kind of matters, the misrepresentation, like, you can just not talk to that person. You know when it's happening. You know when someone is late because they just didn't want to come and had to talk themselves into it. And you can get wrapped up around the lie, or you can be just like, thank you for showing up, because like, wow, that means a lot to me. I know you're an introvert and I know you didn't really want to be here, and I see you and I love you and I know what you did for me and for this relationship, and I appreciate it. Because to beat them up about being 15 minutes late, I would argue that's not being a good friend back. You're not matching what they just brought to the table. It's your job to Encyclopedia Brown everyone's intents, but give someone the space to say, hey, you know what? I really kind of almost lied to you and didn't want to come. Are you giving them the space for the truth? And then what do you do if you get that truth? I don't know the answers to any of these, and it's different in every situation, obviously. If it's not equal, like, owning your shit is what, kids these days, millennials, like to say, like, everybody's got to own their own shit. Well, in my generation, that didn't happen. If you owned your shit, you had to be with someone who was going to own theirs as well. And if they didn't, that became the stick they would beat you with, and you just handed someone the advantage. So there's this whole generation of people that won't admit to what they did wrong because it could be used against them. And that understanding, that worldview was real. That was created. They didn't make that up. This is not like their issue. That is a real societal force in which they have to operate. And never saying that it's ever going to be okay, but you can't afford not to look at the why. And the reason this matters so much, I think that whole idea of cheating, of getting something you didn't earn and didn't deserve, is what is so maddening right now for multiple levels in the world of sports, because sports is pretty much the closest we're ever going to get to a real life Harry Potter story. Like when you look at Megan Rapinoe, who's been playing soccer her whole life. It wasn't her only sport. She was just an athletic kid, but she was so good at it. She was playing on a national level by age 12, and she's been up there ever since. Now, there are very few stories like hers, other than her current partner, Sue Bird, who's also like one of the most decorated living basketball players today. She's amazing too. But these are two unicorns. The vast majority of people that you see in the sports world, they are not the Harry Potter story. That will always be riveting and dramatic and cool to watch. And they're both really amazing women. But where the business is and who gets ahead and what that pipeline looks like outside of, and I'm speaking specifically to like running and cycling right now, it gets a little bit uglier. Lance Armstrong, I would argue that what happened to him was a witch hunt. And it happened to him because he, for a lot of reasons that kind of start with him being completely unlikable and totally hated and abusing his own power within the team. Floyd Landis has started speaking out quite vocally about his time there. He lives in Golden, by the way, and has a cannabis athletic recovery company. And he's talking a lot now, trying to promote that business. And it's what he has to say is very, very interesting. And at the time, it sounds like he's just trying to talk himself out of trouble. Why are you coming after me? I'm just doing what everybody else is doing. If I hadn't done this, I would have been kicked off the team. You are pushing me to get to Lance. And that's not fair. And if I give you other names of people to push, I'm not going to throw them under the bus. Watching him sort of navigate that situation and how terrible and unfair it was just like grating to me. You're looking at the people, you're not looking at the system that you guys created. What are you really doing, watchdogs? So when you look at the why elites cheat, it's not the same cheating that we do in the academic sense. On a professional level, they have maxed out everything that they can get out of a workout, and they're looking for the ability to get more gains. But the only way they're going to get more gains is if they do more work. I don't know if they talked about this with you at RRCA. At what point in a single cardiovascular session do you max out the cardiovascular benefits? And at what point does the law of diminishing returns kick in? You're building a plan for an elite. You're not looking at miles. You're looking at time, because you do the time blocks first and then you double check versus their pace. How many miles falls out? Yeah. So in a what is the longest single session you would assign that is not considered to be a long run, and why?
The longest something can be without being a long run is 90 minutes, because after that, the law of diminishing returns kicks in. Okay.
The law of diminishing returns kicks in 20 minutes into the workout. At 20 minutes, you have maximized all the benefits you're going to reap from that singular session. From then on, you're still getting them, but at a decreasing rate. So if it was like sorry, audience, you can't see what I'm doing right now, but if I was drawing, it would look like an exponent. So instead of logarithmic, it plateaus.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
At 90 minutes, you have maximized the total cardiovascular uptake. And a professional might have 3 of those sessions in a single day, right? 3 90-minute sessions in a day. You heard that correctly. But a single session before going and having the body reset, go into sort of a resting mode, getting a massage, and then coming back and doing it again will be 90 minutes long for that reason. At 20 minutes, the law of diminishing returns kicks in, and at 90 minutes, you're done. So if you're a professional runner and you've reached that point and you've been doing this, you've maximized everything. You're as strong as you can possibly get. You're doing everything just right. That's where cheating comes in. That's where blood doping comes in. It's not to do less work. It's to get that extra biological advantage that you might not have in order to do more work and therefore get more benefits. And though I'm not going to go into the science of how that actually happens, but that's the system of blood doping. You can go read about it in the show notes. I'm going to have links to everything we're talking about right now. But when it comes to elites cheating, and it's so hard to manage, their concept of the biological passport has come out in recent years. The system makes a whole lot of sense. But it's a very expensive one to have to maintain. So right now, the way it works, you've got the International Olympic Committee kind of sitting on top of everything. And one of the side committees is called WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Association. Each country has its own Olympic Committee and its own WADA arm. And they are supposed to be independent for a whole variety of reasons, but it's also funded by individual governments. So a country like South Africa, it's not a global dominant player in a lot of sports. They just don't have the money to put into their Olympic programs. America had a whole lot more in previous years, back in the 70s and the 80s, than it even allocates now. Since the funding comes from each country, the regulation does as well. So yes, a person might show up on race day and have to take a pee test, but the doping doesn't happen on race day. The doping happens in the off season when they're back in their home country unmonitored, getting all those gains, and all they have to do is stop doping long enough that they could pass either a blood or a piss test. So that's how it happens, and that's why it takes so long to catch before irregular things start showing up. Or you'll have an event, like I can't even watch it anymore. I watched like the 10K at the Olympics. I'm like, everyone's doping. Everyone's doping. I truly believed a couple of Americans that I saw weren't, but it's impossible to believe that 7 people set international records in a single event. Most of them set national records by wide margins, and that just sort of happened and no one saw it coming. There was no buzz leading up to it. It was just chatter after the event, and that's what looks really bad, because otherwise it would be like, there are 7 women here that are set national records, and if they set national records, here, I mean, that's where the analysis comes in, and there was no pre-race analysis. Partially, yes, no one gives enough of a shit about women's sports, but also no one saw it coming. That's where the passport comes in, monitoring these people year round, but no one has the money to do it. WADA is paid by a country's home government. And if you look at a Kenya or an Ethiopia, that is a lot of their visibility. A lot of positive press that they get worldwide has to do with the dominance of the marathoners they're producing. Do you really think they're going to spend a whole lot of money making sure that it is pure and clean? I'm not saying they don't. I'm not criticizing them openly. What I'm looking at as a manager, critically evaluating the framework and saying, is this one that is destined to produce truth? Or if maybe is this one of those cases where self-regulation, the incentive is not there to do it? Like, why are they going to throw their own people under the bus? This one thing that drives tourism and industry, why would they ever shoot it in the foot if no one else cares? And no one else is really monitoring around the world. But that's the what and the why and how professionals get away with it. When we're talking about cheating, it's ugly, but that's why it's so rampant. Everyone's trying to, back to that original definition, get that little bit of an edge. Look at what's kind of causing that. Like, you could easily argue that's a super dedicated person. You could easily argue that there's nothing wrong with it. And I kind of buy that. When it comes to the person who shows up 15 minutes late and lies, like, I'm indifferent to the lie the same way I'm indifferent to doping. It happens. No one's really stopping it. So instead of getting mad about it, let's just have 2 categories. The doping category, which is paid at one level, and the non-doping category, which is going to be smaller, paid and incentivized and monitored in a very different level. There'll be a lot of countries that opt out of it. Don't judge them for it, but just pay it different. And I think if you change the pay scale, you could start to change the incentives. The first person to propose that. But again, I don't see that happening anytime soon. But that's one type of competition. Sorry.
Well, no, one thing that you said before, I'm just kind of like, when talking about Lance Armstrong and cycling and the fact that what happened to him is sort of like a witch hunt. I mean, I get the argument, and I am on board with the whole notion of the fact that, like, literally everyone was doing it and those were the incentives. That is why he did it. That seems pretty clear to me. What I cannot see myself forgiving unless he does much more meaningful work is the way he ruined people's lives in the process. I mean, he threw everybody and their cousin under the bus. People who could not come back from that. People whose careers
I'm going to cut you off
ruined.
right here because I don't disagree with you, but I'm not going to let you take me off topic, Sarah. Sorry, just kidding. But no, you're absolutely correct, but that is beside the point, I would argue. What sport did was said, yay, fixed it, got rid of Lance Armstrong, kind of like Me Too. Fixed it. Weinstein's and Dale, they did not improve the system. And since they did not change the system or improve the system or make any noticeable differences, if you look what's happening, the Tour de France is going on right now. It's bullshit, by the way, that they don't have a women's category. You got sponsors that would pay to support that. But there's cheating going on right now. There's doping. People are talking openly about it. Follow Ross Tucker, Science of Sport, on Twitter if you want to read more about that. He has a lot to say, and I retweet a lot of it, and I agree with everything he says. He's like, why y'all caring now? Yeah. He's been beating the drum about the biological passport now for about a decade. So to that effect, I don't disagree that Armstrong is fine. I never said he was okay. What I'm saying is you didn't fix it by only coming after him and a select few. That's a witch hunt. You did not improve the system. The system was not the sum of bad apples. It was the sum of bad incentives. Just like the college admission scandal. Just like a lot of things where people cheat. It's not a bad person. It's a bad system. And we absolutely have one worldwide when it comes to sports. An easy way to address that would be to separate into a doping and a non-doping category and really monitor the hell, because that would divide your resources up, right? If knowing that most of the things people are doing, it's not the same type of drug. They're not doing coke to go faster. They're not smoking crack to go faster. They are doing whatever they can do to get the edge. Kind of like in Goodfellas, when Lorraine Bracco's character is talking about what her husbands do. We just saw them that we thought everybody else were chumps. Our husbands were going out there doing whatever it took to bring home the extras. We were proud of them. And I think we could say the same about an athlete who is doping like a Floyd Landis or Lance Armstrong, minus the bullying that they do to others in the career ruining. But again, look at the incentives. If you're not doping, you're not keeping up, you could argue that person's not doing their job. So either we really monitor doping or we just stop pretending that we do, looking the other way selectively, going after one country because we're scared of how it's going to look if we go after another. And the country they went after hard was Russia. Look how much it took to get them to talk about even Russian cheating and what the sanctions are. It makes the whole thing look bad. That's the fungus that spreads. The fungus was never Lance Armstrong. He was definitely part of the problem. He was problematic. But the problem is bigger than him, and it wasn't solved by his removal. And, he's not gone.
Totally.
He just raised $70 million for some sports-related startups. The links to that will be in the show notes, too. I wanted to talk about that, again, to kind of move a little further into cheating is more rampant than we think. The difference or the line between taking a supplement that is going to be like tantamount to taking rocket fuel, at what point does that become doping? At what point is that cheating? At what point are you not representing your biological capacity because you're taking a supplement? It's not for me to say there's this whole wide list of categories of drugs that are banned for multiple uses or are okay until they're not okay anymore. Marina Sharapova could argue one way or another when she was banned that she was cheating. But honestly, if you look at her medical history, all the evidence that she presented, that's a drug that she'd been taking for a while. Yes, is it one that others had used to dope? It's similar to what Kara Goucher was told that she needed to do. A little thyroid medication will make you lose weight. Too much will actually make you gain weight. And after she had her baby, she testified that Salazar had her taking inordinately high because she wasn't losing weight fast enough. He was ordering her to take increasing doses of this drug to lose the baby weight faster. That does not fall into the category of doping necessarily, but that's taking a drug that is not medically necessary in order to improve athletic performance. How do we define cheating when it comes to doping? Who's allowed to do it and who isn't? So Maria Sharapova, you can decide that she's a cheater because she took something on the banned list, but go look at the banned list and see if there's anything you take. And that matters. Here's the kicker. We have a whole lot of sub-elites, age groupers, people like Frank Meza that are doping because the things that they're doing to blood dope, maybe they're not sitting on top of a mountain giving themselves like blood infusions, but some types of blood doping are a lot more subtle than that. And you and I could do it. I'm not encouraging anyone to do it. I'm just saying there's nothing stopping us because no one's monitoring or watching us.
Right. No one's having us pee in a cup.
Yeah, many runners will go through their whole lives without a showcase race, without a finish time that's worthy of their abilities or their abilities at that given time. It's a heartbreaking thing, but it's something that I accepted a long time ago when I started this because I knew people who would have amazing training runs and then just never managed to have a good race day. But the race days that we had were marathons and there just weren't that many. They were few and far between.
Yeah, you just can't do that many of them. Yeah.
So knowing how inherently unfair this sport can be. Let's say you're an older person and you're taking a steroid that is necessary for an actual medical condition you have as a result of your age. And it has this odd side effect of increasing your red blood cells to the point that you're now faster and more efficient than you've ever been. Running, which has always been hard, is now really easy. Or that asthma medication that you never really wanted to take, all of a sudden you can breathe deeper than ever before. And now you're setting goals and breaking records. As far back as 2011, it became a thing. Doping or perceived doping. And that word is such a broad word that can mean so many things, but it was in the masters community. Now at the World Marathon Majors, as a result of some questions in 2011, instituted doping policies because the idea before had been like, no one in the masters category, they're not getting any money. Dude who's doping to run a 2:20 marathon, that sounds really fast, but he's not getting paid to run that 2:20 marathon. There's literally no benefit. And since there's no benefit to that cheating, there's no monitoring at that level. They had to institute it at the masters level. And now that we're in a world of influencers showing up and doing things and not having to be terrific, they don't have to break 2:20 in the marathon to get money for it. They just have to show up, run, and bring their audience with them. Now we're starting to get into some interesting questions about, do we monitor hobby joggers and hobby joggers? Frankly, that's me and that's you enough. And if so, how? So now that age group doping is really a thing, yes, it's a little harder to track than getting on a bicycle for a couple of miles in the middle of the race because you're pissed at the end of your life that you don't have a race time worthy of who you are and you just want that one. I can understand that. And if that's what Frank Meza was doing, not to keep bringing his name up, my apologies to his family, but when I think about the why and the heartbreak of running being part of your life since the age of 14 and not having a number to show for it, all of a sudden getting on a bicycle doesn't seem so stupid. It seems misguided. But it doesn't seem stupid, especially he's a doctor. He could have prescribed that stuff to himself and he didn't. So there's something to be said for that. Again, not saying it's okay, but if you look at the choices and the options available to any person and what they choose to do, the why can become a little less nefarious and a little bit easier to live with. At the same time, the prevalence of that sort of thing happening might mean that all of us at a certain point, if we do this long enough, and hey, after years and years and years and years of hanging out, our secret goal is right ahead of us. And now we have to pee in a cup in order to own that finish time. The biological passport is there's talk of, and all links to the show notes. It's a relatively new thing. Once it's instituted in professionals, they will then be looking and saying who else gets money, who else has incentive, and trying to make sure those people have blood passports too. It'll be very interesting to get to the point, especially now that if you're a male of a certain age, you have to break 3 hours in the marathon, which is incredibly hard to do in order to qualify for Boston. Like Harvard, it's getting harder and harder and harder because the pool of competition is getting bigger and better and stronger every year to get into Boston. So I would not be surprised at all if, even though it sounds unrealistic to a person who can bang out a 2:30 marathon, like, why would you dope to break 3? Well, the incentive's there, the ability's there, and no one's monitoring it, and it's harder than ever. Why wouldn't you? That's really the question that you should be asking. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. When I was at RRCA, actually, my coaching certification course a few weeks ago, there was this, again, kind of offhand thing that the instructor said, and we just kind of moved past it. And he didn't say this himself. He was quoting another coach friend of his who said it, talking about one of the runners that they were coaching, looking at her and saying, she's not a good enough runner to work this hard at it, which is really coded language for she's not fast enough to be so invested in her time, and God knows, I'm sure they were talking about someone who runs faster than I do, because the linguistic connotation between good and fast in the recreational running world is like no one really even interrogates it. When they say she's not good enough to really care about it this much, what they really mean is her times are not fast enough that I can get on board with this level of investment. And I think that's a very common viewpoint, and probably why it's taken so long for anyone to even consider that this would be a thing.
But now the question is kind of, what are we going to do about it, and how much monitoring do we really want to have?
Right.
And the article is really interesting because the list, like in the Maria Sharapova example, the drug that she was taking, it has been approved in some countries, but not in others for specific uses. It's not like yes or no toggle when it comes to a drug. It has to be approved for specific use. Like I took Motilium trying to increase my lactation so that I could breastfeed my kids. It's not legal in the United States for that reason, but you can buy it. I mean, that's how hard I tried to breastfeed. I cheated. I blood doped in order to breastfeed because I felt a lot of pressure to do that. So there are a list of drugs that are approved for specific uses in some places that have that odd side benefit of making you maybe not superhuman, but does give you an edge. A lot of those drugs on that list are prescribed to older individuals for a variety of very normal maladies. If we're going to be pissed at Maria Sharapova, are we also going to be pissed at your grandpa who starts taking this drug and realizes that maybe he could go relive his glory days? Because we're seeing an increased number of that. And it's not that one-for-one correlation. Like I took up running when I was older. They say what they have to say to fit the narrative so that they're not shamed. But like, after one round of prednisone and now I'm on this steroid and wow, I feel really good. Is that the same as like, the East German anabolic steroid program of the 80s or the late 70s, early 80s? No, but why not? And is it bad if he does? I'm not saying yes or no, like again, to the Lance Armstrong notion, like what he did was completely wrong. And if I didn't make that clear, I'm sorry. I would rather evaluate the system than the people within it. I want to look at the why, and the why comes back to the system. Totally. But where it comes down to a personal level, it's the why not of the grandpa who is reliving his glory days and feeling good for the first time in a really long time. Why not run? What is cheating? What does that word mean? I think you have to have the unfair advantage towards what goal or what reward. Like you cheated, you didn't participate in the swim classes, but you were avoiding ridicule or having to do work that you knew you wouldn't be good at, being the slowest in the room and the constant humiliation, as well as the disappointment of your parents who somehow produce this unathletic child and yet again disappointing them. I see that what you did is an incredible act of not just resistance, but self-preservation that was way beyond your years. And I'm sorry that this is just me psychoanalyzing based on what you told me and knowing you. And I, as a parent, I would be like, wow, I did that to Sarah, not like, wow, Sarah did that to me. And I wish that we would give that grace to anyone other than the guy in the bar trying to say that he worked at Goldman Sachs when he, did have a job at Goldman Sachs, but he was not trying to pretend he was in finance when he wasn't. I would advise that guy to go to another bar where he could do really, really well, man. Like you've got so much going for you. Why are you here trying to be with these people? Like go, don't misrepresent yourself. Be awesome in a place where you can be awesome. Don't come here and do this because that makes you a piece of crap, the piece of crap that you are afraid you actually are. Let's look at the whys, make better choices, because it's easy easy to demonize. Critical thinking is hard, kind of like learning Italian.
Learning Italian is hell hard, but hey, I really love teaching it to people because the amount of satisfaction that they get when they do start to make progress, the real progress that comes from the ugly, embarrassing, humiliating work, that is so rewarding. And that is the one thing that you definitely give up, I think, when you decide to cheat, however we're defining that,
Just saying, I've cheated.
Like you know.
But again, if you look at the incentives I had, if someone had taken me aside, kind of like that guy in the bar, to that example, that guy that went to a bar was a friend of mine. And I remember having this conversation. You've got to stop doing this. You've got to stop doing this. Like, if you just went over here, you would clean up. What is it about trying to force yourself into this room? And I remember I'd hated his response at the time. He's like, well, why are you trying to force yourself into this industry where you don't fit? And I was like, because I had imposter syndrome the whole time I was there too. No one ever has a real sense of belonging. That conversation I didn't want to have, but that was precious. But there's all kinds of information you're going to be given that could be helpful. That is something you just don't want to hear. And my heart always breaks a little bit for the person kind of towards the end of his life who hasn't had a time that was worthy of him or worthy of his abilities, and just wanting it on the record somewhere. I get that.
Right.
I don't hate
I get that. Yeah.
But I don't want to condone it.
No, I agree. I don't hate that. I don't hate the person who wants that time on the record somewhere. I am sad for that person though. I hate the heartbreak. I won't know unless I talk to someone who's been in this situation and who's done this and is willing to talk about it. I don't know whether you get the satisfaction in yourself that you want, because even if no one ever finds out in Marathon Investigation, never comes after you are still going to know that, you didn't get the finish time that you wanted, and you did this in order to get it. Does that feel justified? Does it feel like, what does it feel like in the end? What I'm saying is I'm sad for the person who kind of has to say, well, that's the choice I'm going to make because, I don't know if that makes them.
Well, but if you feel like life has cheated you so continuously and so consistently, that moment of actualizing that finish time, it's not about the how, because life has cheated you. Who cares that you cheated? It cancels each other out. Again, I'm not saying it's okay, but that's part of the heartbreak at sports. Sports is heartbreaking. And this is why I say all the time, be so careful about going for a finish time. Be so careful of letting that finish time define you, because that type of thinking is precisely the framework that leads to cutting corners and cheating. Because I know I'm a 3:30 marathoner. I just have never run a 3:30 marathon successfully, but I'm fast enough that I should. Now I have the time to prove it, but I actually could, you know what I mean? It's like, how do we define a runner and ability, and how we talk about talent really, really matters. And your kids are internalizing that stuff too, whether you know it or not. So it's important how you talk about cheating, how you talk about these things, to stop back and think about how you're actually kind of living them. That matters too. We can make it and I can't say this enough. We can make it about the cheater, or we can actually stop back and look at the system that fostered and encouraged it, and wondered how many others are out there and who's going to be caught next.
It's really important. It's really important to think about, I think, especially if you're raising kids in sports. And I hope people get the opportunities to have a series of conversations with their kids about these things and really talk about those feelings as they come up. I hope that I'll be able to, I hope that someday, I'll be able to tell Roz about me being on the swim team and then not being on the swim team in the 6th grade, and have that be a moment that, I can let her ask me about it, and I can be really kind of open with how I was feeling and where that came from.
Well, because I don't think that defines who you are. I think that defines a situation. You have never presented yourself as a champion swimmer who then, well, actually I cheated to get on the team. There's a big difference between the person who cheats to get on the team versus the person who talks about what a champion swimmer they are, who is cheating in their past to get to that level, versus the person who is telling the story about just not doing this thing that they were pressured into doing, they didn't really want to do anyway, that would have been thankless. I don't see any evil or ill intent or misrepresentation in your story. You didn't misrepresent your swimming ability or capacity. You didn't misrepresent yourself. This was not a character flaw. This was a bad environment to learn whatever lesson it was that they wanted you to learn. And why swimming? They could have put you anywhere where you might not have had the same result. When do people lie to their parents? When we know that they're going to be disappointed in us, or when we know that we're not living up to their expectations. And we do that in ways large and small. Sometimes we think we're just avoiding a conversation that we don't want to get into, but are we misrepresenting? Is that okay? When is it okay and when is it not? And what are the stakes involved? That's all I want to care about. I'm going to give you grace and let you off the hook on that. I don't think that tells me anything about you. It doesn't change my mind about you. It doesn't invalidate any of the work that you've done. But yeah, blood, dope, hoping that's going to invalidate some world records. I don't specifically think Frank Meza wanted to have a world record. I don't think he was trying to misrepresent himself. I think he did some very stupid things, if they're true, just looking at Sim, what he was disqualified in California International Marathon in 2014 and 2015 and banned for life. And if you judging from that and not the LA Marathon right before his death, if you just look at that and say, I see a guy that just wanted to get a time, and maybe I'm being too kind, but I'm seeing a guy who just wanted to get a time that he thought was worthy of him and did something stupid in order to do it, but after getting disqualified for some reason just kept going and doubling down on it instead of backing away, which is what happens, right? It's not about right or wrong as much as it is the why and the misrepresentation. I don't think he was trying to get in the record books or win money. I think he was trying to put a demon inside him to rest before he moved on. And that I can identify with.
Yeah, me too.
But I feel good about this conversation. This is what it all has to do with. I feel like it all blends together and ties in. But if you disagree and you absolutely hate it and you think we rambled on too long, let us know. We like knowing what works and what doesn't, but we just ask, instead of putting it in the review of the podcast, because we're a brand new podcast and those reviews help us grow, if you could send that information to us privately and give us a chance to fix it before you tell the world that we suck, that'd be awesome. info@coachedandlove.com. Leaving a review on iTunes is really helpful for any new podcast, and we appreciate it, but those reviews matter more and they mean more and they go farther if you put words in there too. Please send improvements to us privately, but praise be public with that and widespread, just like I am for all my runners.
Woohoo! Go win at life, everybody.